I always used to laugh at the idea of seriously using a smartphone for filmmaking, but this one kinda changed things for me. In this video, I'm gonna show you how I captured these shots, why you don't need ProRes, no gimbal or SSDs, and how I make the log footage look good in DaVinci Resolve. Now, Apple loves to market the iPhone as this cinematic machine.
Cinematic mode, cinema quality.
Cinematic.
And cinematic.
The cinematic standard.
But their ads never really convinced me. The footage always looked kind of over-sharpened, they almost always use cinematic mode and its fake blurry background. It just often feels more like a gimmick than something professional. I recently upgraded from the iPhone 11 Pro and honestly I didn't expect too much from this one. But I was quite wrong. The footage is super crisp without feeling over-processed or over-sharpened. Even on a bigger screen, the image doesn't fall apart, and zooming in, there's remarkably little noise. I was honestly shocked the first times I looked at the footage on my computer. And I don't want to overuse the word, but the 5x telephoto lens is a game changer. It delivers real optical depth, not the fake blur you get with cinematic mode. I found myself using it a lot more than I thought. The stabilization is unreal. Whether I was walking, filming handheld, or even running, the footage stayed smooth. And another surprise was how well the iPhone handles sun flares. Whether I was shooting into the light or panning across bright scenes, the lens flares looked natural and more similar to something you would see on a bigger camera and lens. And finally, microphone quality. This entire section was actually recorded on my phone. This is just a decoy here. As you can see, this is just my phone and you just need to make sure you don't get too close to the mic like this because of the plosives, but if you keep it at a good distance, it sounds awesome and you can seriously use it as a mic for YouTube videos or stuff like that. Now, I praised the iPhone 16 Pro a lot in this video and for good reason, and even with all its strengths, it still has its limits. In low light, you're gonna see more noise and less detail. This is especially true when using the ultra-wide or telephoto lenses, where the image can fall apart quickly. On the main wide lens, the iPhone performs better, and that being said, it's still not bad at all. It performed actually surprisingly well in a lot of low light situations. Flaring can be a real issue, particularly at night. Bright light sources like street lamps or the moon can create harsh and distracting flares that are hard to control. Now, just for fun, let's do a quick blind test. Can you tell which one is which? Now let's have a look at the Blackmagic Camera app, and we will start with a couple of settings you might need to change. We're not going to go through all of the settings because most of them you can just leave as they are, but let's begin with codec, which is quite important. Now I choose HEVC, which is the H.265 codec. This is the most efficient codec. So it is compressed, yes, but it's going to give you very good quality still, and you can still color grade your footage. There is enough information, it is high quality. Why not the other options? Well, Apple ProRes 422HQ is going to give you the best quality possible from this phone, yes, but the file sizes are going to be enormous and you are going to have to use an SSD hooked to your phone to record it to. So for me personally, it's just not worth the hassle, and I tested it. For me, HEVC with the maximum bitrate is the perfect sweet spot, and I would say for most people it is. So resolution 4K, there is no question. Color space, choose Apple Log HDR. Now this is it for the record settings. And now the first one for camera is enable vertical video. I'm not sure if this is enabled by default, but I did enable it. If you don't enable it and you go to camera, you're gonna have this view. So it's gonna be horizontal video no matter how you hold the phone. But I sometimes like to record vertical video as well. So I enable it, and now you have the vertical view as well. Next will be lock white balance on record. That is quite important because I chose to enable auto white balance, as you can see here, and depending on the lighting, the white balance is gonna change. But as soon as I hit record, the white balance is gonna lock in, it's not gonna change. This is really important because changing white balance during your recording is not gonna be nice. So make sure to enable lock white balance. Next will be shutter measurement, and here we have two options. So if you have no idea what shutter angle is, maybe just leave it at shutter speed and you're gonna be just fine. Shutter angle is usually only available on cinema cameras, and we can now choose the shutter angle. Well, what does it mean? We set the shutter angle, for example, to 180 degrees. This means it's now gonna double your frame rate for the shutter speed. So if we shoot at 25 frames per second, 25 times 2 is gonna be 50. So it's gonna shoot at a 1/50th of a second. And this is gonna result in smooth motion blur, which helps making your footage look more cinematic, because in all the movies, they use a 180 degrees shutter angle. But for that, you're gonna use an ND filter, because if you shoot by day at 1/50th of a second, it's gonna be way too bright without a filter. So if you don't own an ND filter, there's really not much you can do. You can choose speed or angle, it doesn't really matter. If you own an ND filter, definitely choose angle and then select 180 degree shutter, and it's gonna look much nicer. For me, unfortunately, I don't own an ND filter yet, but I will definitely get one soon. And all of the other settings are basically untouched, except for one, which is down here, the LUT selection. So I like to use the Phantom LUT. I can link them in the description below. They are really nice for previewing, but also for color grading. I can definitely recommend them. And an option you have here for the LUT is recorded to the clip. So if you enable that and we go to camera, you see there is a red LUT icon on the top left. That is basically a warning that your LUT is going to be burned in. So let's disable it. And now this is the raw image, right? And if we enable the LUT, it's going to now bake in this look to the recording, and you're not going to be able to change it afterwards. So if you plan to color grade your footage, definitely make sure to disable the option to record the LUT to the clip. But if you don't plan to grade it, maybe enable it and you have already a clip that looks nice. So those are all the settings that are relevant to you, and we will now jump over to the camera. And I'm gonna show you a couple of things to know. For the frame rate, up right here, I shoot everything in 25 frames per second. This is also kind of dependent on my location because of Europe again and the 50 Hertz power network. But if you live in the US, you're probably gonna shoot in 24 or 30 frames per second. For me, it's 25. And if you wanna shoot slow motion, you just select off speed, like right here. And then you can choose your frame rate, let's say 50, or it can also be 100 for 4 times slow motion. But I usually shoot in 50 FPS, and then you have a 50% slow motion, which looks really nice. And also one really important setting is right here. This is the exposure setting. So I usually leave this on auto because it works really well. And well, it depends on the lighting situation, but I usually go a bit lower than 0, and I just make sure I don't clip the important highlights like the sky or the clouds. And to help you make this right choice, you can also go into this menu at the bottom right here and enable the zebras. Right now they are set at 95%, and as you can see on screen, well, now it just changed because of the auto exposure, but if I stay right here, you can see the zebras on screen. But if I tilt up, it's going to disappear because it's going to adjust the exposure, it's gonna see, okay, we're too bright, so it's gonna change the exposure. And it usually does a pretty good job on auto exposure. So I would encourage you to just experiment a bit with different auto exposure settings, and I think you're gonna be just fine. Now, the last thing to show you is gonna be stabilization. And I would definitely recommend using cinematic here. It's gonna give you the best results. Of course, you can use extreme, which is really steady, but for most cases, cinematic is the way to go. Now I'm going to show you how I work in DaVinci Resolve to make my footage from the iPhone 16 Pro look nice. This also applies to footage from older phones. The important thing is that you use Apple Log, and then you can just use the same principles. First, I'm gonna create a couple of nodes. We're gonna do that with Option S on Mac or Alt S on Windows. Let's just create a couple of nodes. And now on the second last node, let's create a CST. That's a color space transform. You find that in the effects. And now we can transform our footage. So just as an information, I am working in a DaVinci YRGB color space, and the timeline color space is Rec 709A, and the output color space is also Rec 709A. So that's what I work with. And I tried a lot of different options, but if you make YouTube videos, for example, this is the way to go, because the viewer is going to be the same as the thing you're going to see on YouTube, for example. So now let's go back to the nodes and let's select the input color space, which is going to be Rec 2020 for Apple Log. And the input gamma is going to be Apple Log. So let's select this. And now this is already a very good base for our color grade. The image is now transformed into our working color space and looks much better, but we're not there yet. We can now close down our effects, and let's create, or let's rename this node here to exposure. We're going to adjust the exposure. And the way we're going to do this is with the HDR wheels here. And the first thing we will do is map our wheels to our color space and gamma from what the iPhone has recorded. So this is again Rec 2020. And gamma is going to be Apple Log. And so if I now change the exposure, it's going to be very close to what you will see in your camera. So it's a much more organic, natural exposure change. So we just make this a bit brighter, maybe slightly underexposed, but that's fine. All right, that's better before and after. And what we're going to do now is let's name this one to contrast. And let's now add some contrast. We're going to do this with our primaries here. I just lower the lift a tiny bit. This and add some gain. Yeah, that's not bad. We can also do both. We can use the contrast slider as well. There are a couple of ways to increase contrast. There is no right or wrong. Just be careful not to clip your highlights. Oops. But there isn't enough room, so we can even raise the exposure. All right, now we can also add another node here with to adjust our white balance. And the way we will do this is we're gonna use the primaries and change the offset here. Yeah, maybe some adjustment, doesn't need a lot. It looks quite good already. And now we can also add some saturation. So let's use this node here, and we're already in the color slice tab, and let's add saturation. This isn't the same saturation as this one here, by the way. This one just makes the colors more rich, more deep, and I just much prefer this one. And you can even adjust like the balance and depth of it. So if you just really overdo it and you just here adjust the balance, can see kind of what it does. This is not scientific at all. This is just eyeballing it, but I just usually like to play with those a bit, and I don't leave it at 0. And now I can reduce the saturation again. Let's compare it before and after. Yeah, this looks much nicer. And this is already a really nice look. This is quite natural, but you could totally go with that one. Now, at the end, what I usually also like to do is add another node, which we already have, and we can now go to effects and we can add the film look creator like this. And you can see that it already adds a film look, which, yeah, it's not bad actually, but we're gonna reset this to clean slate so it doesn't do anything. And now let's just, well, what I really like to do is adding halation. So let's do that. Let's see what it does actually before and after. If you look closely here, it just softens up the highlights. And this is what I really like, because in this case, it doesn't look too digital. I'm actually impressed how well this looks, but the halation just makes the image look a bit less digital. So this is quite a nice effect. And what I also like to do is add a vignette like this. It's quite subtle, but still nice. And you could even add some grain like this. Yeah, sometimes it is a bit much. Let's not add grain this time. And yeah, so this looks already really nice in my opinion. Let's compare it before and after. That's a very nice look. And now let's apply this look to this clip right here. So we just middle click the mouse like so. And yeah, we've got the same look. It looks really nice in my opinion, quite natural. We could also, you know, go further from here. We can make it more cinematic even if we like to. So what we can do is use another LUT just after the color space transform. And there are even free film LUTs in DaVinci Resolve. So if you go to the LUTs folder, we choose film looks. This is already pre-installed. And let's just use this one. This is a classic Kodak 2383. Let's use the D61. And this is gonna look wrong because it's not meant to be used like this. So what we did here is we transformed our footage into our working color space, which is Rec 709A. But this is not meant to be used in Rec 709A. It's meant to be used in Cineon film log. And now we need to change the output gamma, which is, for this case, Cineon film log. It's this one here. And if we use this, you see it looks much different. It's not as contrasty anymore, and it is a nice film look. We now need to adjust the whole thing. So you see it's a bit bright, so we just lower the exposure again with our HDR wheels like this, which, yeah, works very well. We might need to, you know, sometimes you can just adjust the shadows and the highlights with these sliders here. Just don't overdo it. We can now just lower the lights a bit and increase or lift the shadows a tiny bit, not too much. Yeah, that's better. And we can now also play with the contrast. Make it nice and punchy, maybe, whatever you prefer. Maybe lower the exposure a bit again, lift the shadows. Yeah, that looks quite nice actually. We might also need to adjust the white balance again. So let's go to our node white balance and just use the offset wheel. Maybe shift it a bit into this direction. Yeah, this looks quite nice. And let's just check the saturation here. We might want to change that, or we can even, you know, adjust the density. So this is just going to make the colors more deep, more rich, and it works quite well for the blues here. So I prefer them if they're a bit darker, and also usually adjust depth here just to control the effect a bit more. Yeah, this is really nice. Now let's just check what our film look creator is doing. Yeah, I quite like, again, what it does with the highlights. It might be too much for your taste. You might prefer a more natural look, but for me, I quite like it. And we can now also go back to this clip now and just apply those changes. So let me create a new version so we can compare with Command Y. New version is added, and now version 2 is loaded. And we can just apply this grade by middle clicking again, like so. And now we can just compare from this to this look. And actually this looks much nicer in my opinion for this case. It might also be the white balance, because here everything is a bit warm and we've got more color separation here. Like the sky and the water is more blue and the buildings are kind of warm. So I quite like this look here. This is just the Kodak LUT I just used here. And so this is all free. This is the free stuff, the free Kodak LUTs. The color space transform is free. The film look creator is free, and you can just use the free version. And that's how I make my footage look nice. Now, the iPhone isn't gonna replace professional cameras anytime soon, in my opinion at least. But as a portable filmmaking tool, the iPhone is incredible. Whether you're capturing cinematic shots on the go, creating content for social media, or just documenting everyday life, the iPhone is more than capable. For me, it changes how I approach casual filmmaking mostly. On vacations or family occasions, I will probably shoot a lot more on my phone. The quality is so good that I don't feel I'm compromising or missing out if I don't use the bigger, more expensive camera. And if you're coming from an older phone, it's absolutely worth upgrading. But here's the thing, you don't need the latest and greatest iPhone 16 Pro. A model like the 15 Pro does the job just as well. And honestly, the new camera control button, it's been pretty useless. I disabled it almost completely. So if you're worrying about missing out on that one, worry no more and just get the 15 Pro. And at the end, it's of course not about the gear, it's about the stories you tell and the moments you capture. And capturing moments with an iPhone is just much more convenient because it's probably always in your pocket anyways.